The Quiet Professional, a podcast about law enforcement, security, justice, and politics. We are digging deeper on the issues and going where the information takes us with access to experts and authorities. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Quiet Professional. Coming up here, we're going to be catching up with some of the prior guests I've had on. It's been about a year since I've had these two gentlemen on, but I wanted to get them back because I think that they're the definition of selflessness and sacrifice. And they have some new things, new projects on the go. So I wanted to bring attention to them, and we'll get into some of the current events going on just because of the respective organizations that they worked for. Thought it'd be good to kind of get their opinions. So, first up, I have Peter Forcelli. He is a retired ATF Deputy Assistant Director and former NYPD homicide detective. He is author of The Deadly Path: How Operation Fast and Furious and Bad Lawyers Armed Mexican Cartels. And he is host of, or co host of, the new 10-4 Tavern podcast. It's live on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can catch it on YouTube. That's correct. That's where the live stream is.
Right.
I usually have to watch it after the fact. It's very hard when you got kids to sit down and just watch a full program. So, next up, second guest here is Robert or Bobby Ledogar. He is a Navy veteran and former Supervisory Deputy U.S. Marshal. He is author of Lead, Being Brooklyn, which hopefully will have a release date soon. And it's a story about some of the things he went through, some of the challenges and tough times while in the U.S. Marshals organization. Also, Bobby was a recent guest on the Urban Valor podcast, which I recommend people check out. It was a very powerful and impactful appearance, which we're going to discuss. I will also put a link up in the episode description just so people can go check that out. So, welcome to you both.
Good to be here, Nathan.
Yeah, Nate, thank you very much.
Yeah, just kind of talking a bit about all the work that you guys have done, and it's been just over a year, I think, since both of you have been on the show. I'm wondering, and just this is stemming kind of out of the recent uh, podcast that you did there, Bobby, with Urban Valor, and just some of the things you mentioned there about how talking about your story has helped in some ways. I'm wondering, how many times have you guys now told your stories, whether it's on podcasts or interviews? Like, you kind of have a ballpark? Do you keep track of this stuff?
I personally have been on probably 70 podcasts by now
Wow.
related to the book. But I also talk about 9/11. I was at 9/11 on September 11, 2001. I've spoken at FLETC, believe it or not, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center has brought me into their leadership academy to speak to police chiefs from around the country and sometimes from abroad, Canada, for example, Albania, Montenegro, and Australia, because they believe that there's an ethical leadership aspect to what happened with Fast and Furious that they have me come in and discuss. So, I mean, that's been really the only changes. So that's in person. I fly down there for a day, talk to them for a couple hours, fly back. It's been interesting. I mean, it's always good to tell the story. It is somewhat therapeutic. But, when you go through something like that, you want people to learn from those hardships and mistakes that happen because you don't want people to repeat them.
Mm-hmm. And yourself, Bobby?
I have not been on as many as Pete, but I'm catching up to him.
Yeah.
It is very therapeutic, and for me personally, it's helped me a lot to talk about the negative parts of what happened to me, but also to talk about my career and all the excitement that happened while working in Brooklyn. I've been I'm a big part of the two foundations that helped me, the National Police Defense Foundation and Federal Enforcement Homeland Security Foundation, as they invited me to speak publicly at other events, which it's overwhelming and so powerful. And for me, I already know that my story getting out there and talking about it and being open and I'm easy to find, just like Pete. You can find us all over the internet. But I'm getting calls from like younger guys who may be jammed up or who've been involved in a shooting like what's going to happen next,
Oh, okay.
how the process is going to play out. And I just got one. It's unbelievable. I got one last night from a younger guy, brand new guy on the job in Brooklyn, and they went out in Brooklyn working a PD case, a homicide, some perp who climbs out the window in the projects, gets out the window on the eighth floor, and hey, it's the guy shouldn't have went out the window, and he slipped on his grip or his footing and fell. But it fell down. And Pete, the buildings there in East New York, in the 7-5.
Yeah.
So, and
Oh.
then hit one of the fire escapes platforms. And, it's a DOA, but for these new guys that are out there, like they're exposed to serious, investigations. So the guy he called me last night after he spoke to his parents and he's like, hey, what's going to happen next? So you walk them through the process, how the investigation is going to take off after that incident.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. It's funny, Bobby. Like you were in New York probably during what I call it the golden age of policing. I'd like to think I was too. But back in like the days of Ed Koch, Rudy Giuliani, even David Dinkins as mayor. Cops, if you were out there doing the right thing and bad things happen, generally you weren't going to get fed to the wood chipper. I wouldn't want to do those jobs today because there's so much political appetite to throw cops under the bus, even when they do everything right, that it's somewhat terrifying. So it's great that you're there to provide comfort to these people, Bobby, because they need to hear from people who've walked the walk. 'Cause I wouldn't want to do that job today. It's scary. You don't know who your enemies are.
No, you're so right, Pete, because the leadership is gone, the supervision is gone, and we've seen it. You and I have both seen it, where people that are moving up in the ranks haven't done the job that they're
Mhm.
supervising.
Mm.
Yeah.
You've been on the street, like you ask people that are doing the job, like, have you ever been in a fight? Have you been, and do you even know how to handcuff? Like going to cell block, right? Remember, Pete, going into the cell block, it's like,
Yeah.
you better know these are your handcuffs, put them on. Let's go. You have to move around. You have to know how to pat somebody down and talk.
Mm.
You got to know how to talk to the perp and get information. And the leaders today, they never did the job. They read a book and they got promoted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now they're telling throughout in the field to do it.
And you know what? That we're gonna get into as well, like some of the people that have reached out to you. One thing I wanted to kind of ask, just what you were mentioning right at the start, was it's kind of helped you. So have you guys found overall by talking about this stuff over and over, it's not re-traumatized, it's not re-victimizing. And I wonder that just because you see sometimes when people go to court, like a sexual assault victim, and they say, well, we made this person tell their story X amount of times on appeal or whatever it might be. It's like sometimes telling your stories, and I mean, you guys had horrific things going on and that have been done to you. Um, so you found overall though that it has helped. It's therapeutic, I think was the word that you used, Bobby. So, is that kind of the general sentiment?
For me, yes, personally, big time. And then when a guy like Pete hears my story and doesn't know me 100%, but knows people who know me, and he finds out more of the facts, and I have a guy like Pete who did the job, rose to the ranks, became a boss and a leader, and he believes me
Mhm.
and he's supporting me, that it's a very proud moment and it's very helpful
Yeah.
because he's done the job. He's dealt with the good and the bad. And I'm a middle manager. Pete was, one of the bosses. So to get reassurance or confidence or support from Pete and other men or women who have been leaders or been through what I've been through and more, and know, it's a great feeling, and it helps you a lot because, as I said in the past, and Pete will know, you like guys like us, all three of us, you've accomplished stuff. You're educated, you went to training, you have certificates and qualifications and requirements, and you've done the job. For some people who, judge you now, who've never done what you did or been in a situation where you had to be a leader and a boss and make decisions to decide your career path, you tend to believe their words, and the demons, they get in your head
Yeah.
and they confuse you. But,
Yeah.
thank you to you, Nathan. Listen to my story. And of course, Pete, I mean, come on.
No, I agree. And I'll take it a little bit further. I agree with you 100%. But I think what you and I have in common is that neither of us forgot what it was like to be on the ground, boots on the ground. Like I'm still that uniform cop that walked the foot post in the Bronx. I tried to never change. You didn't either. And in that role, you realize the most important thing you have. It's not a title. That the titles mean nothing.
Yeah.
Right? If you're doing it right, what matters is what your peers and the people, especially when you're a leader. Like I always believe that the people above you don't get to decide whether or not you're a good leader. The people you lead get to decide whether or not you're a good leader. But the respect of your peers and the people that you've led is everything. So when you go through the things that Robert and I went through, there's a lot of fog that's put out there because the bureaucracy wants to protect the bureaucracy. So they're going to try to muddy up your reputation even when you do the right thing because there's people that they want to protect. Sometimes it's cliques. Sometimes it's, we have to protect the name of the organization at all costs. It's organizational pride. So going out and telling the story helps to also set the record straight, to clear that fog so people know what you're really about and what your intentions were.
Yeah.
And I find that to be cathartic is that, hey, man, and look, anytime I speak to a group, and I'm sure, Robert, you probably do the same thing, I'm like, hey, man, any question you want to ask me is fair game. Anything. There is nothing off the table because you want to be transparent because, again, they try to muddy you up and stick things to you because they try to protect things that aren't important. And sometimes in doing so, we'll try to muddy up the name of you or anybody that even supports you. So that's why I think it's just so important to really get the truth out there. And again, the only thing you take to the grave with you that really matters is your reputation, right? So, I mean, you have to defend your reputation vigorously. And I just think that's very important.
I think right off the bat, one of the things that makes it so difficult is that it becomes kind of a numbers game where the organization, they instantly have a platform, right? They've got the whole media department and they got things that they
Mhm.
can put out and it's out to the news. So the story is massive and you're just one guy. And to kind of get your story out, before a book, before podcasts, before all that stuff, you're just one guy. And yeah, you basically got to go through all the people and tell your story a thousand times. And you're hoping it's the telephone game, right? You tell 10 people, they tell 10 people, and it just keeps multiplying. But that's long down the road. The story can also change in there. So, I mean, it's a giant undertaking. So unless you get a platform, like yeah, I would say you guys have told your stories and done a really good job at it. A lot of people though, I mean, they don't get that opportunity. But I guess this kind of rolls into the next thing I was wondering about is, you know, who has reached out to you? You mentioned Rob, one person that reached out last night, but you know, now people I think have that ability to hear or see your stories out there. And then are you finding like it's a growing number of people that are reaching out and looking for that help, that advice? And where do they come from? Is it like outside government, outside law enforcement too?
In my instance, it's a little bit of both. Like I had a local police chief from northern New Jersey reach out because he's going through something, just asking me, "Hey, what did you do? Why did you do it? What should I expect?"
Mm,
So I've gotten some of that. It's flattering that I've had like the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, like I said, reach out and say, "Hey, we think people can learn from what you went through. Would you come down here and talk about it?" So that's nice. And again, you want people to know where the landmines are. You've seen them blow up, hurt people, sometimes deservingly, sometimes not deservingly. So you want to be part of that. I've had some Hollywood interest on the book, but it's premature to think it'll go anywhere. So that's also been good because I'm gonna tell you that's another thing. I wrote the book to set the record straight
yeah.
because when I was leaving ATF, you still heard either the Republican version of what happened or the Democrat version, neither married into the actual truth. And writing a book is an expensive venture, and I've come nowhere close to making my money back. But look, it was never really about the money. It was about, like we were saying earlier, about setting the record straight. So I've heard from people, not a landslide of people, but the ones that I've had communication with, it's been impactful. And again, it makes me feel like I'm paying it forward because I still love the profession and I love ATF. Some people did some really stupid things, but it wasn't all of ATF. And I know Robert feels the same way about the U.S. Marshal Service. It's a great organization, but some people did some really dumb shit, and he called them out. so he can hold his head up high. But that's the nature of the beast. The problem is there's plenty of people who will just bite their tongue and say nothing and let people get steamrolled because they're so concerned about that next bump in pay or that next
Hmm.
promotion or that next PCS move. And that's the sad part, actually.
Well, it definitely takes a lot of courage too. I mean, it's what you guys went through is not easy. So I imagine when people hear that story, they go, "Am I up for that challenge?" But Bobby, like for you, you said the guy reached out last night. What other have you experienced this kind of a growth in people looking for help or answers on their own situations?
Yeah, just to piggyback off Pete, I get the same things. I'm getting phone calls too from leaders within different state, city, and even federal agencies, asking advice about what's going to happen and what happened to them or what's happening to some of their men and women who've been jammed up. And more so, they're like asking me if it's okay if I talk to other people who are in bad situations. And I definitely do. I definitely want to help anybody I can, but tell me the truth. You better tell the truth. I mean, there's some guys and girls who've done stupid things, who, broke some policies, and the truth hurts. You got to tell it. You got to own it and go with what's going to happen to you. Um, I'm a few steps behind Pete, though. I did too, as well, get some calls from, people in Hollywood that are interested in my story that, are blown away by what happened, and is it really true? You know, is, you know, is it the good old boy program or, do they toe the line, the company line? And I'm like, look, the facts are there, the evidence there. Look, pull up my case. It's all there. It's open. It's nothing sealed. I'm not going to push it right out there and drop all the names, but you can get it.
Yeah.
But I do. I get called and I like speaking about it, like going backwards. It helps me. It helps me a lot, and it's helped other people.
You were very forward sharing information. Like when we were looking at doing the podcast before, when we did it a year ago, I mean, you were providing all the case facts, you were providing all the information, and then everything leading right up into telling the story yourself. So it's yeah, like it's all there.
Well, what I found, it's like some kind like a badge of honor right now for me, and it might be silly, but there's a guy who runs a platform called Stolen Valor.
Mm,
And he researches everybody, and especially with the military guys, and there's some law enforcement, but those guys have I connected with them and I was like, hey, check me. They're like, we checked you out. You are the real deal. You're 100%.
okay.
And those guys grab my stories and push it out there. So, the support you get from, you know, truth tellers and fact finders, it's huge because it's funny, right, Pete, when you hear the government, oh, we can't give a statement. Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Yes, you can. It just like it just say like you could say it's under investigation or go look at the court cases and all the documents are there, the evidence there, and you'll see what the government has said and what they cherry pick. You see it.
You know what? I don't know, Robert. I'd like to hear your opinion on this, but I agree with everything you just said. For the record, what I've noticed is within the Department of Justice, which is run by lawyers, and they're of course very risk averse, and they're also very slippery. They like to tell agencies exactly what you said. And I'm sure the agency also has that inclination to, hey, let's not say anything. What they do is they allow a narrative to get set, right? And then when you try to write that narrative by telling the truth, it's hard because people believe that they were first told. What always blew my mind is within the Department of Justice, you have DEA, you have the U.S. Marshal Service, you have the Bureau of Prisons, you have ATF, and you have FBI. The one organization that goes out there and puts out a statement, not always accurately, but the one that will always stand up and say something is the FBI. Where a lot of the other agencies within DOJ will sit like a scolded child in the corner and say nothing and allow a narrative. Now, the problem with the FBI is they will always defend the bureau. The FBI is almost cult-like in that regard, where they will feed people into the wood chipper, whether they're telling the truth or not, because with them, they will protect the name of the FBI above all things. I mean, that to me is mind-blowing, but I've seen it time and time again.
Is that a cultural thing? Is it leadership too, or what is that?
I think it's both. Look, leaders should want to get the truth out there. I mean, and look, if it's something ugly, If the place needs to get burned down and built back up, well, then burn it down and build it back up. But that's not what you see. So it's poor leadership to lie to the public, to the taxpayers. They're the ones that pay our salaries. Pretty sure Robert would agree with that, right?
I agree 100%, and I find it. I have to be. I'm small-minded on this one, Pete, because I'll talk about the Marshal Service. How does the Marshal Service not want to come out and boast about all the successful and positive work they're doing? We have such support to prove the facts when we're going after a fugitive.
Mhm.
We have paperwork to show that we're in the right, no matter what, going through that door. So why do you not want to give out the positive press releases like, we just arrested this perp, who's wanted for a double homicide? Instead, they come back and they go like, we can't give any statements right now. Person was arrested. He's going through the system. That's it. You got there's a warrant. Give them the copy of the warrant. Give the complaint.
Yeah.
Give it. It's there. It's open. But they don't. But the FBI does.
Yeah, well, you know what's weird is like the FBI obviously has its detractors, but there's some people who think it's like when I was in Canada. You grew up in Canada, the Mounties, right? The RCMP, they're
Mhm.
almost like part of the nation's, the fabric of the nation, so to speak. That's how people view the FBI down here, and a lot of that's smoke and mirrors. But the weird thing is, like, if you look at the other agencies within DOJ, ATF, I love ATF. I loved our mission, but there's a lot of people who hate it because they enforce the gun laws, tobacco smuggling law. Some
Yep.
people want to be able to buy tobacco in another state and whatnot. You look at DEA, there's people who adamantly believe drugs should be legalized. They'll demonize DEA. The Marshal Service is probably the one organization that you can't find anyone that I know who does not believe in the mission of the United States Marshal Service.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree. They should be up there defending themselves because their mission is pure. I'm not saying that as an agency, they don't make mistakes. Every agency, because they're staffed with human beings, is going to make mistakes. But the Marshal Service, and even within the federal law enforcement community, there's a lot of animosity sometimes between agencies.
Oh,
Not with the Marshals. I don't know any organization that does not like the Marshals, except some FBI people because they have UFAP. And so they consider themselves manhunters, when the reality is the best manhunters in the United States are the United States Marshal Service, hands down. And they also rescue kids, which is something that you don't hear much about. But they do a lot of rescuing of kids that are abducted, and held in hotel rooms or whatever by, parents who abscond with a child or someone else. I mean, you don't hear about those things, but they're almost like firemen. You know how everybody loves firemen?
Mhm.
Everybody except fugitives love the Marshals.
With the amount up here in Canada, with the way we release people currently, you'd almost think people would not, like, if we had a Marshals service similar to the one that you have down there, people would be like, they'd be anti-Marshals because they just think we should release everybody. Um, no, but have you guys seen a lot of change based on the stuff that you've been doing from the organizations themselves? So that's right from the associations and unions. Have they taken any lessons from this too? Now, like, has the ATF or the Marshals, have you seen any change of policy or leadership or the way they do some things that you think or can associate to maybe your stories?
From my end, and I'll let Robert speak. First of all, we don't have unions. We have associations, so they're not true unions like you have in local police departments
Okay.
or some federal agencies. But in some ways, things have gotten better. But I'll tell you, in some other ways, things have gotten much worse. In my former organization, for example, going back to what Robert was talking about earlier with leadership, people who went out there and did the job and make their decisions based on experience. If you traveled around the ATF world to the 25 different field divisions and even walked around headquarters, you probably only find 3 or 4 executives who I would say really went out there and earned their medal. A lot of them are just from people who promoted because they were willing to move somewhere. Now, I don't know how the Marshals are. I'll let Robert speak about that. But I would say in some ways things got worse, frankly.
Oh, okay.
But the guy, the number 2 at ATF right now is a knuckle dragging street cop. Great guy, made spectacular cases. I have deep, deep respect for him, but he's got a thin bench to help him lead the organization right now.
yeah, I agree with Pete. And for the Marshal Service, it's very disappointing because, and I'll come right out and say it, the whole DEI movement just changed the whole Marshal Service. And I am a prime example of that because they used it to take me down when they came out and they made the accusation that I was a racist. And, they jumped on it because it was an easy out. Or it was publicity for the agency within the government with OIG and the DOJ. And they're like, oh, we have a racist here. Let's go after him and make an example, which they did. But now then the evidence and the facts and the truth came out that it was all false.
Yeah.
But what happened was, and it was even under the administration with the Biden administration, with people to turnover, and you saw people get promoted in the Marshal Service that were not qualified, never did the job, but they moved them up just because the names or what they look like, which is totally wrong because it made everything dangerous, and now it's dangerous today.
Hmm.
And they didn't stay the path. I think it's going to change eventually because the marshals now under Trump, they just appointed a new director who was the marshal in Southern Florida, who's supposedly a great guy. And I hope he
Yes,
really is. And I
he
hope
is.
he can clean it up, and make it better and move forward. But to crisscross on something, and Pete, like, I believe the Marshal Service, just like the FBI or ATF and DEA, they they grew to a position that they couldn't handle. Like the Marshal Service has this group called SRT, the SWAT team of the Marshal Service. My opinion and my experience working with them, I think that was a complete waste. It was silly.
Hmm.
We shouldn't have a specialty team like that in the Marshal Service because we have 94 districts. You need people. You need manpower. I don't need to take these men and women from me, to go do an assignment in another district. And give me more people and train everybody the way we're trained. Like when I worked on the task force,
Yeah.
and Pete knows when you work on a task force, you work with all other federal agencies and the NYPD. Listen, I was SWAT. I was ESU, man. I pulled up, you opened up the back of my truck. I had every tool in the world you can think of. And Pete knows too, you work in New York, it's a different animal. You hit a door, and let me tell you, you have an NYPD radio and the shots are fired and you call Central, the, the cavalry showing up. I mean, within seconds.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's what we can boast about that and say how great it is. But and I know that, don't take all these money, because you have a position as a headquarters person, to create these specialty units when we should be helping the locals and giving them more money, make their SWAT teams bigger because you need the people there. I don't need somebody from Virginia to fly to New York in 5 hours to help me. I need help now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know how it was in the Marshal Service, but our SRT, and I agree with you, our teams got too big and too expensive.
Yeah.
But I mean, they were spending, I don't know what the cry pants, I think they're called. When I was a negotiator on the team, we wore BDUs, right? So we wore just cloth BDUs. Cost as much as the regular uniforms our people wore, they were just a different color. Now these guys, they wear Arc'teryx jackets. They have these cry pants that they cost like $250 per pair of pants. So they just throw money at these guys. And then the other issue I have, and again, I have respect for the SWAT guys because they put themselves in harm's way. But sometimes they're allowed a little too much influence over what weapons people carry, regular agents, how agents operate, because they influence the training.
Mhm.
So it does get cumbersome, and sometimes some of them forget where they come from and think they're Navy SEALs and forget, hey man, you're an ATF agent that's in a special assignment. Knock it off. You're never more than 20 miles away from a 4-star hotel. You're not at some fob in Afghanistan. You know.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's a good way to put it. You know what? And maybe we'll kind of jump right into some of the stuff you guys are doing now, though, because I think you are making good change out there. And with the stuff that you're doing, you're able to call out some of these inconsistencies, some of the problems that you do see. Bobby, I want to start with you and ask what's happening with the book. So it's LED, LED, being Brooklyn, and where that's at. Like, is it because I've read it, it exists. So what's it looking like for a release date on that?
You know what? I'm so anxious to get it out there, and I may have worked a little bit too quick to push it. And the lady who is writing it, Natalie Riley,
Yeah.
who you met, Nate,
Yeah.
and but it's the lawyers. My lawyers are sitting on it, and they're waiting to see what the end is going to be because I still have my final appeal with MSPB. And now with the Trump administration, a lot of my stuff is being spoken about at higher levels.
You wrote a letter to the president, correct?
I did, and I wrote to several different senators and congressional people, and they're well aware of my case. And amazing with my support from the National Police Defense Foundation is Joe Okapinti,
Mhm.
and he was in the same position to me, and he grabbed my story. I mean, it's amazing. It's so overwhelming that, and he was pardoned by Trump for all the wrongdoings that happened to him. So having Joe in my corner and the foundation is huge. So, but the book, the lawyers want to slow down a little bit with it, and that's a lot of it's the lawyers. Everybody there.
Yeah.
You know, and Pete probably knows my one lawyer. Is Raymond Granger, who used to be a U.S. attorney in Eastern New York,
Yeah, I
and
know the name.
I love him. I love him to death. And he's just, once I call about the book, he'll just hang up on me. Like, that's it. We're not talking about that anymore. But it's definitely going to happen. It's going to happen. And what I'm doing currently, I'm a security consultant for a medical organization, and that's why I'm in New Mexico right now. And it was amazing, Nate. Yesterday or the day before, I had a doctor come up to me, and she said she Googled my name,
Hmm.
and she checked me. She was like, wanted to shake my hand and say she was so impressed by what I've done. And it was just, I'm in New Mexico. Like, how the hell can that happen? So it was great. I'm glad it's out there.
That's one of the big things I found from doing just the podcast alone was the amount of reach that you have. And you really don't know who's listening at the end of the day. And I've had people reach out or make comments on social media or different things. And you go, wow, like I never would have thought that this person would listen to it or care or whatever it might be, but it's like you can go to some places and all of a sudden somebody wants to talk to you about it, and it's a really good feeling because you're like, hey, I'm making a difference and the message is getting out there. So and I wanted to ask on that, so you did this Urban Valor podcast. Can you just talk a bit about how you got connected with that and what that experience was like?
Well, I watched some of the podcast that Josh did, and Josh Gutierrez from Urban Valor, who's out in California and by I think by San Diego area. And I was out there, and we connected before that. We were setting up the dates to do it, and he was very eager. And he used to work for the BOP. He was a Marine veteran, and then he was a local sheriff in whatever counties are out there in California where he was. And we were going back and forth. Again, I shared a bunch of information with him, and he he tracked me down on LinkedIn, and we just connected that way. And I like his podcast, and that one really helped me a lot. I mean, he has a lot of followers. It was great to sit down with him. It was 2-3 hours,
Hmm.
going over everything. And I enjoy them. I enjoy doing these talks. I enjoy the Q&As. And, it's just like Pete, you can ask me any question you want. If I have the answer, I'll give it. If I don't, I'm not gonna bullshit you. I mean, it looks silly, you can pick it out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And there's too much to talk about.
Yeah. I wanna know how all these people keep getting studios. I can't afford a studio. You know? But it was really good, and I was saying it was super impactful. There were parts in there that like, we didn't even discuss during the episode that I did with you, and I mean, some of the stuff, you were able to get a little more in depth with, and it was mind-blowing that that could exist in a police organization, or a law enforcement organization. So, I was glad that you did it, and, I'm glad that it's helping. Just kind of going back to the earlier stuff that we spoke about. So, what do you have kind of coming up next? Is there anything else you have lined up, or just waiting to hear about this case and then maybe the book and things falling out from that?
I don't think anything is gonna happen with my case for years,
Oh, wow.
because I think there's only one person on the quorum at MSPB right now. until the president um, appoints two more people. I don't think it's going to happen. They're so backlogged now. And then with all the silliness that's going on with the government and especially through the FBI, all these people are putting in their, appeals through MSPB. Um, but I'm hoping politically wise with my speaking like this with you guys and getting it out there that, somehow it seemed like the podcast are the way to go where it would get to, the president or some of its people just to be of interest. Give me 15 minutes with the president and I'll tell him my story, and make it happen.
Yeah.
But
Well, and speaking of the podcast, I'm gonna flip to you, Pete, because your story got well, Fast and Furious project got mentioned on Joe Rogan before, and I was
Yeah, but
messaging
he won't take my calls.
you.
I would love to go on Rogan. I might actually sell some books.
Yeah.
I found selling books to be hard. The nice thing I think for you, Robert, is your story is very compelling. So I think once the book comes out, you'll probably get a lot of offers, not just Hollywood sort of stuff, but hey, man, why don't you come talk to our executives? Because we've gotten some of those, where a company will pay you to come and speak to their executives about ethical leadership or what you went through, because they don't want things like that to happen within their company. So I mean, the opportunities come out of the book. But the podcast, what happened with that podcast is Tommy Joyce was the Brooklyn Cold Case Squad commander for many years. Great guy. We've been friends. We lost touch for a while. We reconnected. And he'd call me once a week and we would just talk about the stuff going on in law enforcement, just vent about, stuff. So he decided one day, he goes, we talk about this. Why don't we just do a podcast? And so instead of spending an hour on the phone bullshitting with each other about it, maybe we'll invite a guest in. So he's the one that came up with the concept. We're not monetized or anything. So that's what it is. We get on this podcast and we talk about what's happening in the world. But, we also recognize there's a lot of really good people out there that have seen other things. So, we're only, I think, 6 episodes in right now.
Mhm.
We're going to have other guests come in. Robert, I'm going to have you at some point, definitely. And just to come in and talk about what they've seen, because our listenership is mostly cops. And a lot of them are New York cops. In fact, the lion's share are. I also think it's important for them to realize there is policing outside of New York. Because I'm going to tell you, I tried to take what I did in New York to Arizona, and it did not work. Obviously that's history now. So, but I mean, look, in New York City, you pull over a car with 5 guns in it, it's front page news. They may even have like breaking news. Where in Arizona, we pulled over cars with 30, 40 guns in it, and we couldn't even get these people prosecuted. It definitely didn't make the news. So just to kind of vent, talk about the law enforcement culture and, and hear other people's stories. In fact, yesterday we had on another deputy marshal, a guy named David Gonzalez, who was the marshal in Arizona, who, when I was getting my teeth kicked in by the Department of Justice, had my back and treated me like, probably as good as he would of his own son. But the guy was in law enforcement for 50 years. So even David just coming in and telling some of the stuff he saw as a DPS officer and as a ranking member at DPS and then as a marshal, was nice, I think, for folks to hear. And we're going to continue to do that as much as we can.
Yeah. Well, in your podcast, so when people look it up on YouTube, so it comes up under New York's finest, retired and unfiltered podcast. Can you just explain the dynamic there?
Yes. Well, that's the platform that we're on. There are 2 NYPD officers. One is a detective. One was a lieutenant, Lieutenant John McCary and Eric Dim. They wouldn't take the jab during COVID.
Oh, okay.
They had the antibodies. Their doctors told them not to take it, so they were fired. So they came up with this platform called The Finest Unfiltered. And what they do is they go after the corruption in the NYPD. And let me tell you, they're pretty damn accurate with the stuff that they're finding. And they have a lot of people that give them information. And they take no prisoners, man. It's brutal. But what they did is, again, John has the network, John McCary. They expanded and they brought in 2 executives. Can't remember the names of Layson and Lukash, 2 former chiefs. And they have a separate show called The Executive Perspective. And they talk about leadership issues because there's a lot of leadership issues in law enforcement right now. And then Tommy and I were the latest addition to the platform. And our theme is cops pulling up to the bar and just telling war stories and bullshitting and solving the problems of the world. So, ours isn't as probing perhaps as the Executive Perspective and definitely not as The Finest Unfiltered. And they are truly unfiltered. But, we just try to stay relevant and just talk about things that people might care about. And look, like I said, man, there's a lot of people that want to hear real crime stories and war stories. just to kind of feed the beast, you know?
Yeah. Well, they won't have any shortage of material, especially with stuff going on in New York right now. Even from
Yeah.
way up here where I am, it still makes the news up here. I mean, it's the NYPD, and they're in a million movies and subject of all kinds of news and things. So, yeah, it just seems like a pretty crazy world to police in there. I like the point that you brought up though about knowing about people outside of your city or even the state or wherever you're policing. That's one of the things I found when I have more of the American guests on. Um, they like to hear kind of what's going on in Canada and the overlap of how similar it is and the similar challenges, the things that we share in the kind of the issues of the day, the topical stuff and all the rhetoric that goes back and forth. And one thing I always bring up to them too is I don't think they realize the impact that the US has outside of the US and just the influence that it has. So, like all those narratives when it was like George Floyd and BLM, all that stuff comes up here. It has a complete impact on the way we police and whether our history is the same, whether relations are the same, almost had no meaning. It was just your cops, you're bad, and it's like, but we're a different country and we have different history when it comes to some of those things. But it was, 99% of our media up here is American.
Yeah.
So the narratives are here.
I'll tell you this, as you know, when after they didn't know what to do with me after Fast and Furious, so at first they threw me in headquarters for 6 months, writing policy, and then they realized that was a bad fit. And the deputy director at the time knew that I told the truth, and he's one of the few that had my back. And an opening came up in Toronto, so they sent me up to Toronto to be the liaison for a couple of years. And I've said this 100 times. I have deep respect and love for Canadian cops because they're just like American cops. But when I would sit in the squad room, because I hung out with the detectives, I didn't hang out with the chiefs. I met the chiefs. Like I'd love to get Chris Lewis, the Ontario Provincial
Hmm.
Police Commissioner from back in those days, on our show because he was just a great leader, just a good man. But I mean, if I sat there and closed my eyes, whether I was sitting in an OPP office or Toronto Police Service or York Regional Police, you name the department, I felt like I was sitting in a precinct in the 45th precinct in the Bronx or the 7-7 in Brooklyn because the complaints, the discussions were the same,
Yeah.
right? Complaints were the same problems, just with a Canadian accent as opposed to a Brooklyn accent or a Bronx accent.
Yeah, no, you're
Yeah.
100% correct. And I think people have found a little bit of comfort and solace in the fact that, hey, it's not just I have to talk about this with the 40 people that I work with. It's like I can even reach out to another country. There's a lot of people going through similar things, if not the same. So, no, really good stuff. And I'm glad that you guys are finding success in your own ways, in different ways. And I wish you all the best on that front. Just kind of at the end of our time here, I wanted to just jump into some current events and get your perspectives on stuff. Some of this might come up on your podcast, Pete, but I wanted to talk a little bit about FTOs and the designations and just how that has changed the landscape and whether it would have been helpful or hindered things when you guys were with your respectful organizations before, uh, or your respective organizations. um, I'm just wondering, like, what do you see as a benefit coming out of these FTO designations? And did you kind of wish you had that at the time that you were in your different areas?
Yeah, I mean, look, we don't work in terrorism cases for the most part. The FBI comes in and exerts jurisdiction on terror cases.
Okay.
Look, the thing that it does bring to the table, which might have helped back in the days of Fast and Furious, is nobody cared about arresting straw purchasers. But if we could have charged them with providing material support to a terror organization by purchasing firearms for the cartels, maybe there would have been some interest. But other than that, when it comes to terrorism, for us at least, for ATF, we turned it over to the FBI. You
Okay.
know,
Yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering is like, would designating it, these groups as FTOs, does that have an impact? Like, what does it mean for the ATF specifically? Because I know just like our understanding from up here in Canada, now the politicians are starting to get into this and be like, we want to call this group, one of them right now is the Bishnoi group out of India. And some politicians say, let's designate him an FTO, but I don't like. It seems like nobody understands what that would actually mean and who would do anything about it. So it's like we can
Right.
say all these things, but which organizations now get some extra powers, or does it change laws, and what are they even going after? So from the ATF side, you don't think like
Yeah.
it wouldn't have changed much for you guys back in the day? And then I'll
Not,
jump to you, Bobby.
not much, but I'm interested in hearing Robert's thoughts on this too. It would have given us the opportunity to charge, like I said, instead of charging straw purchasing when no one cared about. If you're providing support to a terror organization, they might take those cases. But the fear that I had is, like I was saying earlier, because the FBI has a stronghold on terror-related stuff. My concern is, do they then come in and push not only us, but DEA, who are experts in their field now, saying, hey, leave the cartels alone. They're terrorist organizations now, back off. There's a period of time where they probably would have gotten away with that. I don't know if they would get away with it under the Trump administration, because Trump's not a huge fan of the FBI because of Mar-a-Lago and some other stuff. But I mean, Robert might have a different opinion. I'd love to hear what Robert thinks. That would be my fear: is that the 800-pound gorilla comes in and just steals it from everybody else.
As terrorist organization, now they're all being identified as terrorist organization. Back in when Pete and I were working, we had MS-13 out in New York and Long Island. So I partnered up with the FBI task force out there. We had a great relationship, but everything goes through the U.S. Attorney's Office and what they're going to label it. Today, the MS-13 are terrorists, and
Right.
that the TRD are terrorists.
And Nicaragua.
Yeah. So the FBI, of course, they're the lead investigators on terrorism cases. So they're going to take it, but it all depends. And being in New York, it's a different animal. You have to work together. And again, it's the U.S. Attorney's Office on what they're going to prosecute and what they're going to elevate up to that level. As far as the marshals, if a perp is identified as a terrorist in there, all it does is heighten our security level within the courthouse and the cell block and transportation. And that's all the Marshal Service is primarily concerned about, as well as the U.S. Attorney prosecuting the case or the judge sitting on the case. The FBI, of course, it's not a hidden secret. The FBI wants to control that because they want the money for the manpower and all the publicity. That's where the Marshal Service, ATF, and DEA, that's where we get our ass kicked, because we need leaders to go in there and fight to government of why we need money and manpower to do the job 50-50, just like FBI.
Yeah.
I mean, Pete's going to tell you, he knows the whole thing. Like, the ATF is the master of trigger lock.
Yes.
And listen,
I started that program.
I jumped on that because Pete would get city cases, trigger lock them. The perp would be sitting in Rikers Island. Pete would have the warrant, have to put a detainer on the guy, file it with the Marshal Service. I would just piggyback off his case. Now you have ATF and Marshals working it together because the Marshal Service had TFOs at Rikers Island. Pete cannot afford to send 2 of his agents to sit at Rikers Island for 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours to get a perp out of there. When he would have a connection with me, we do all the transport, work it together. You master the case right there. That was the biggest
The way it should be.
hurdle.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
you'd work together. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole purpose was, once they went into the federal system, and this, MDC, everybody in federal prison in New York City is ratting on each other. No one, very few people go to, because they don't want to do the massive federal sentences. So what happened is they would come in and they would just provide us tons and tons of information. That's why we even bothered doing it. And the sentences were a little higher.
Yeah.
So they would try to work down towards a cooperation agreement. But it worked because, again, there's no honor among thieves. And once they were actually looking at some consequences, they wanted to find a way out from under that rock.
Yeah.
So that's why that program worked.
So just as we're coming up to the end of the time here, I got one last question for each of you. So I'll start with Bobby. Just kind of staying on this topic of the foreign terrorist organization. So do the marshals, would they be the ones that would go? Are they the ones bringing back these cartel members, or is it a different organization that like physically gets the body and brings them back? Or is the marshals the ones tasked with going to other countries to do that?
The marshals are there. The marshals, like in Mexico, we'll talk about the cartel. So there's marshals over there in Mexico working cases, but they're working with ATF and DEA and FBI and HSI. They're all over there together, as working with the Mexican Marines, doing everything. Transporting them back, it's all private jet. coming back. It's private. We contract out to get the airline for the flights.
Okay.
And that's how it happened. And it all depends on manpower.
Yeah.
That's strictly it. It doesn't matter who's the lead agent on the warrant or the complaint. It doesn't matter at all. It's the manpower. Everybody's that part of it working over there, like with the cartel. I believe it works really well with the other agencies that are there because these guys are doing the job.
Yeah.
So do they like with me, like with El Chapo coordinating with me out of Brooklyn because that's where the case was? Yeah, but sarcastically, the problem is the leaders from headquarters get involved, and they all want the photo op, and they want the blurb in the newspaper that they did something. Listen, it's a fact. I've proven it that
Yeah.
my agency headquarters did nothing except take the glory. It's fact.
And this
And
is
it was
the story you had when
yeah,
you were on the Urban Valor there, which
yeah,
people definitely should listen. But you're 100% right.
yeah. That's it. That's all. And Pete knows more. I mean, he's the guy, right?
No, but when it came to Mexico, we relied on the marshals. I mean, we didn't do the extraditions; they're the experts. One of the things I've seen lately that kind of rubs me the wrong way is, like, for example, they had some cartel people getting off the plane, and the person whose photo is taken with the suspect is the DEA administrator.
Hmm.
I've seen pictures with, like, Christine Noem today. There was a picture that came out with her and Cash Patel where she's holding a rifle in a very awkward way. She's wearing body armor and a hat. I really prefer not to see that stuff. Like, the person who should have been taking the picture, escorting that prisoner off the plane, is the marshal who brought him here and the case agent, maybe from DEA, who worked the case, not an
Yeah.
administrator. There's a lot of, like, photo ops happening at the higher levels of government. I'd rather see them give the credit to the people who actually worked the case and developed enough probable cause to get the bad guy back to the United States. But it's a different era, man. We're in a new world.
Yeah.
100%. I wholeheartedly agree. I've harped on the whole photo op thing quite a bit up here. People are probably sick of hearing me talk about it. So
It's true, though. I mean, you
it
got to say
is.
it, right?
Well, it totally is, but it's just I don't know. People just think like I got to jump in front of that camera for whatever reason. And then last thing I wanted to ask you real quick, Pete, was uh, there's all this stuff going on about fentanyl going south from Canada, which it 100% is. The politicians can say whatever they want, do all the bickering, but it 100% is flowing south. Um, One thing I never hear about though is, and I don't know why on the Canadian side they never call this out, but it's like 90% of our crime guns are from the US. We don't make handguns up here. Some people make rifles, like some companies make some rifles, not very good quality. So we're not seeing them in crimes. Um, but I'm just wondering, like, you know, have you heard anybody talking about that? Have you heard of that from your side of the border? Is anybody mentioning that when that whole debate comes up?
Well, that's the guns going to Canada has been an issue since way before I even went up to Canada, which was in 2012. Like, I remember back in 2012 to 2014, roughly 80% of the guns that went into Canada went across the Windsor Bridge. Right? They came through the
Yeah.
central United States, across the Windsor Bridge, and then they would be spread around the country. Some would come up through, New York as well, but for some reason, the lion's share they traced coming across the Windsor Bridge. I don't know what those numbers are today. I do know that there are some folks who I'm pretty good friends with, like Derek Maltz and Mike Brown, who are former DEA executives. Like, Mike Brown was representative to the Far East, who are still tracking that even in retirement. And so they tell me that there's a lot of stuff coming south and north. And look, it's all the precursors are all coming from China. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's the issue. Is the Chinese are intentionally sending that stuff here. You have cartels working hand in hand with Chinese nationals in Mexico to help press the pills and get them up here. So, I mean, there's certainly a concerted effort, in my opinion, to poison a fraction of our society. But look, the Chinese are students of history, and if you look back at the Opium War, country did it to them. So, they're now doing it to us. I'm glad that they passed the Fentanyl Act recently. I would just like to see some folks really put some effort into this, and really sanctions on China to stop the precursor chemicals. And there's other stuff too. There's vaping products that they send here that you cannot sell in China.
Yeah.
They're harmful to you, but yet they sell them things are flying off the shelves here in the United States, and you wonder at what point do they start putting more harmful substances into the vaping product? I mean, there's a lot of things that we have to address, and I just hope we start addressing them. You know, we sit on our hands a lot here.
Oh, well, I was about to say, I was like, I think the Americans are the ones doing stuff about any of this, and Canadians on our side are not doing enough if we're doing anything at all. So, yeah, similar gripes, right? We're back to what we were talking about earlier. It's the same on both sides of the border. Uh, and you know what? That brings us right to the end of the time here because I want to make sure we get you out for your next thing. But uh, where can people follow you guys? Where can they buy the books? I'll come to you first, Pete. Obviously, the book is on Amazon, but um, where else would you like them to follow you or even connect with you?
Ironically, the place I'm most active is on LinkedIn. I know LinkedIn, most people are on Instagram or X, Facebook. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I enjoy that the dialogue there tends to be very professional, occasional deviation. As far as the book, they can get it at Amazon, like you said, or I have a website. It's www.peterjforcelli.com if they want to get a signed copy. I don't keep a huge inventory on hand, but I have some. Get them out there. If somebody gets it, I'll get it with them a couple of weeks the most. But yeah, that's the places that would be easiest.
Great. And Bobby, where should people connect with you if they need to reach out and want to hear the story? Where can they find your stuff?
Well, I don't have a website yet like Pete, so I'm a couple steps behind him, so don't forget that.
Once you start selling books, you're going to need it, brother.
I do, I know. I'm the same. I follow Pete. I'm on LinkedIn. That's the best thing for me, and I like to keep it professional. But I am on Instagram now and TikTok, and that more so because of the podcast with Urban Valor. It blown up really good for me. And it's simple. You type my name in Google, you're going to find so many things. Just like Pete, you type our names in there. We're not hiding. You can
Yeah.
find us.
Awesome stuff, guys. I will put up the links to your prior appearances on this podcast so that people can listen in there and all the links for social media, the book, and then the Urban Valor appearance. People really need to check this stuff out and realize that it is hard to step up to the plate sometimes, but we need people doing it, and it's for the better, for the betterment of the organizations, but also just for people's careers and guys like you who are actually trying to make a difference out there, showing the real leadership. I think this is where the real leadership is. So I want to say thanks for what you're doing there, and hang on the line for just a few seconds.
Thanks, Nate.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening in and following along with the discussions. Be sure to click the follow or subscribe button on your respective listening platform. Also, check out the Quiet Professional on X and Instagram under TQP780. And most importantly, please share where you can. Everyone has a part to play in getting these education and information pieces out there, so pass it along. Thanks again.